Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clements. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John.
You doing okay today?
I'm doing awesome. How about you?
I can't complain. I think I'm doing pretty well. Here we are, coming up towards the end of summertime, and it seems as though this summer has been the summer of our discontent. All the various protests and riots and violence and disquiet that we've seen in some of our nation's largest cities, starting with the race riot up in Minneapolis after the George Floyd incident, but really kind of just going on and moving forward. And at some point, you have to kind of question whether or not it's still all about George Floyd and more about something else altogether.
Yeah.
And so I don't think anyone can take serious issue with that. I mean, obviously, you're always going to have a straw that breaks the camel's back or the spark that sparks off the powder keg or what have you. But here we are at the end of the summertime, and we've seen federal agents move into various cities, and we've seen the local cities' politicians go all ballistic about, here come the feds, and Donald Trump can't do this.
Yeah,
and
defending the
all
courthouse.
And you know something, you kind of sit back and kind of shrug your shoulders going, what in the world, what sort of powers does the President of the United States have in enforcing the rule of law at a local level? And Sam, that's a question that I don't think a lot of people in our country really understand.
Yeah, and I think it's something that both sides have kind of been upset with is understanding that question, what the correct answer is, and that is how much power does the President of the United States have, and when can he use that power?
Yeah, because a lot of people would say that I guess it really all depends on which party's in power and which party you are a member of, I would imagine. But think that the President of the United States has near dictatorial powers like a Lukashenko or a Putin or something along those lines, or a President Xi in China. And that's really not the way that our founding fathers structured our federal form of government. And, the president is the one that executes the laws, not the one who adjudicates it. That's the judicial branch, or the branch of the government that creates them, and that's the legislative branch. And in the federal government, that's the Congress. So it is the president that is actually in charge with enforcing the laws, but even on a state and local level, there are a lot of constraints to federal power, and particularly the presidential power. And so when the president sends federal agents of some variety into, say, a Portland to protect a courthouse, the local residents might get all up in arms. I mean, literally and almost figuratively, if not, actually, figuratively, if not literally. But the thing is, the federal government doesn't necessarily have the capacity nor really the legal authority to come in and police an entire area for an extended period of time.
Right, and that's kind of the main point, and I think where we're seeing the issues from both sides is some people are wanting more of the federal government to come in and just kind of squash a lot of the looting and the rioting and protesting, and other people are wanting the federal government to get completely out of this situation. And so you're seeing a place where there's almost no way the president can win right now.
Well, I think you're right, and I don't think it'd matter which party the president was a member of in this type of situation, given how polarized our two political parties seem to be right now in the United States. And take Portland as a perfect example. Portland is clearly one of the more, I'd say, left of center cities, major cities. Well, San Francisco's up there too. One of our more left of center cities, and so is Minneapolis, and so is Seattle. I'm wondering if I'm beginning to see a common thread here with the violence. But the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, I believe his name is, has been very forthright. He doesn't want federal agents really there, and he comes out yelling and screaming about it. But when you take a look at from outside of Portland, outside of Oregon, from places like Alabama or Ohio or even Virginia, wherever you are, and see how many straight nights of protest, with most nights turning into riots or near riots, how much longer can a major city like the city of Portland in Oregon allow this to happen? I mean, it seems as though it's been almost the willful destruction of the rule of law that has been presided by the mayor and the city council of the city.
Well, I think the answer is twofold. I think, one, they can probably let it go on as long as they want it to. But two, the consequences are going to get worse and worse, at least speaking of it in economic terms and what that looks like. And I think you hit one of the main points, and something we've tried to drive home a lot is that strong property rights and the rule of law are two of the biggest things for economic growth. And what we're seeing is the erosion of some of those. We're seeing business owners leaving Seattle, some business owners leaving Portland, and some of these places where they're not really having their property rights defended. They're not having the rule of law upheld. And I think we're going to see the impact of it pretty significantly.
Well, and President Trump, rightly or wrongly, is kind of running on rule of law type of or enforcement, police enforcement, something. The antithesis or the other side of the defund the police movement. He's running on that, and that's going to be one of his major points or platforms, pegs of the platform, leading into November. And you just have to kind of wonder how this all plays out with, Joe Sixpack, John Doe, Jane Doe. Does it play in Peoria? That type thing. Because I got to tell you, if you were a dispassionate, completely independent voter, which I'm not sure if there truly are people that are completely independent, that don't lean one way or the other, but if you were completely independent, taking a look at what's the violence that's going on in places like Chicago, just unbelievable increases in shootings and homicides.
New York is setting records.
New York is going back to the good old days of the 70s with some of their violent crime stats. Take a look at really kind of all the homeless problems that they're having in San Francisco and small crimes there, and what you're seeing in some of these more left-leaning cities, and yet it seems as though either the citizenry of these cities don't care, or they've elected people that don't care about enforcing the rules that are on the books. And if that is the case, what should the federal government do about that, or should they do anything about it?
The libertarian in me wants to say that they probably shouldn't do anything, but I've talked to you before. I'm not sure how well libertarian ideas work when you actually put them into play, and so
it's really is tough, because you're right. The libertarian in me as well say, federal government shouldn't do a darn thing about it. These people,
not their problem.
It's not their problem. The way that the civics courses taught me back when I was growing up, that is the states and localities to police their own ordinances and whatnot. And if people don't want to vote out the people that aren't going to enforce the local laws, then why is that my problem in Birmingham, Alabama, if Ted Wheeler can't control Portland, Oregon?
Right. People are either going to change who they vote for or leave, most likely. And
so, so that's the libertarian. That's the way that theoretically it should work. Ideally, it should work. However, having helped start a business, and here you are, a key part of a small business yourself, Sam, is it fair to be a business owner, a property owner of a city that maybe you didn't vote for these people, maybe you had no idea, and here you are, your property is being violated. Your wealth is being eroded because the politicians simply won't enforce the rules that they have pledged to uphold. And is it fair for those people to have their lives ruined by people that really didn't study the same civics textbook that I did?
No, it's not fair, but I think, at least in my opinion, the fingers should be pointed at the state and local government. I think that's a dangerous path to go down, personally, to start bringing in federal agents, and whether it's the Reserve or the Army or ATF or whoever. I think that's a dangerous path to kind of go down. And I think the repercussions and the way to change things should be by businesses leaving, if that's to be the case, or people voting the people out of office that don't seem to care about any of this. So I think those are the routes that need, people respond to economic incentives a lot more than just words. So I think we would need to see some serious economic changes for people to enforce the rule of law.
Well, this is one of those areas, and one of these times I'm not going to disagree with you on that. We go down a very slippery slope if we want the federal government to go in and enforce the rule of law
Right.
in Portland, to go in and take over the streets of Chicago because, the Lori Lightfoot isn't doing their job or something. I'm not saying that she is or isn't, but what I'm saying is when you have the federal government, the central government taking over the policing and the enforcing of laws at the state and local level, you see our entire structure of government breakdown, and that's when you run into dictatorial powers. And hey, if it's your political party, you might think that's swell, but guess what? It might not always be your political party, and then all of a sudden you're not so happy about it.
That's why it's a dangerous path to go down.
So it's a horribly dangerous path.
There's things that people may like right now, but picturing themselves being on the other side of the aisle when someone else is doing it.
So
people don't tend to like that as
much. No, certainly not one bit. So
I mean,
but at the same time, is it legitimate to have federal agencies send in security forces or some type of manpower, woman power, people power to protect the federal buildings, federal property?
Sure.
I mean, making sure that people don't torch the place.
I don't have a problem with that.
And and that's where I think a lot of us probably wouldn't have a problem with that if the federal agents are on the ground protecting federal property as opposed to trying to influence local elections or the rule of law or anything like that. And that's where I think that the divide is. And one side currently, the left side of the aisle, saying that Trump by doing this is trying to circumvent the rule of law, which is a very strange argument. He's trying to circumvent the rule of law to ensure that people actually enforce the rule of law. And then the president on the other side saying he's going to do whatever the hell he wants to do.
Yeah.
And so the truth is, as it is in most cases with extreme, the truth is someplace in the middle. The president can't just do whatever he wants to do. I don't care who the president is or what political party. But at the same time, you got to enforce the rule of law at the local level, or else bad things will happen to your city and state.
And this isn't a new phenomenon. Presidents trying to kind of circumvent the way things are supposed to be done.
That's what presidents do.
I'd
be very disappointed if we had a president that didn't try to do that type of stuff.
I mean, that's almost all.
What sort of wimp would we be electing if they didn't try to do that?
I mean, that's what executive orders have become, is a way to circumvent the proper channels. So it's not a new phenomenon. It just goes back and forth about who's upset about it. I mean, Republicans were upset about Obama's executive orders for 8 years, and now it's the other side upset about more executive orders.
It's kind of a farce.
Yeah.
It's really
people
kind of a joke.
upset about the same things they do.
Yeah,
it's a big
that's
hypocrisy.
That's the whole deal. Everyone's all. Right now you have one side of the aisle furious about one thing. It's just. The Republican Party now stands for stuff that the Democrats stood for 10, 20 years ago.
Well, one being a border wall.
Another one being, Republicans
deficit.
are now against free trade. It's like whatever. Black is white and white is black, and the clock struck 13.
I don't think we're at a point where you can convince people on the other side of the aisle that they're engaged in a form of hypocrisy right now. Ever. I'm just saying, and it's gotten worse and worse where people are upset about the same things that they're cheering for and asking for when it's their party in power.
Well, of course. And that's where I heard someone tell a pretty good joke. It all depends on whether or not you think political humor is very funny. It said something along the lines of, if the Democrats were to pass legislation or propose legislation that everyone in the United States jump off a 2,000-foot cliff, the Republicans would counter with one, everyone jumps off a 1,500-foot cliff because it's not quite as far. And so there's a lot of truth to that. But, when push comes to shove, I really would encourage people going back, dusting off the old civics textbook from high school or even junior high, depending on where you live, or even just pulling out a copy of the Constitution. Everyone's saying, if I hear someone else say something's unconstitutional, I tell you what, just go read the Constitution and see exactly what powers the president has, see exactly what powers the Congress has, and then read the amendments, and you get a better idea of what the federal government can and cannot do. And all those things which are not enumerated in the Constitution as powers to the federal government are therefore reserved for the states. That's the way it's written. That's not necessarily the way it's always, enacted, but that's the whole thing. These are whenever you question what the president can do, whether or not something's constitutional or unconstitutional, you can go pick it up.
Yeah.
and read it. Now, some lawyers out there might be yelling and screaming and throwing things at their iPhone, but that really is the way that it should be. So, all these people are upset with the president, but I got to tell you, going in there and protecting a federal courthouse, that's what he's got to do.
Yep.
That's a fair use of executive authority on the federal government. However, it's not fair use of executive power by the federal government to go in and start trying to police the main streets of Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Chicago, what have you.
I think we agree here.
Man, we typically do agree. That's why I like you so much, Sam. Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear from you also. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. You can always send us an email to tradingperspectives@oakworthcapital.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in hearing more or reading more of what we have to say or how we think, you can check out our blog, Common Sense, amongst other good articles, at oakworthcapital.com underneath the Thought Leadership tab. As always, Sam, I'm going to give you the last chance.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.